Hello friends, today we will talk about the Agile methodology, specifically Scrum. So we'll talk about in detail different Scrum ceremonies and what is Scrum and all the details. So let's start with the basic concept of what is Agile and how it is different from traditional waterfall model. So in traditional waterfall model, we'll start with the requirement gathering and then analysis, design, then we do the development, then we do the testing, and then finally the deployment. So each stage of this waterfall model is dependent heavily on the previous stage. For example, you cannot start your design until and unless you have a completely documented requirements, and if your design is not complete, you cannot start the development, and so on, the testing, and finally the deployment. But in any stage, if you have any problem, for example, if you are in the testing phase and you found a problem that goes way back to the requirement itself, then there is a huge problem because you might need to remove everything and then start over. And down the stream, you detect the problem, it is more costly from the maintenance or even development perspective. So to address this problem, the new concept came called Agile, where still you have to do all those things that you are doing, but instead of thinking everything together at one goal or one release, you break it up. You break it up in the piecemeal where every release is an increment of the overall product. So it is basically nothing but just to break it down in several components, right? So you first gather the requirement and you have just a vision of the goal. You don't even have the full requirement of the product. You start with the basic product that you want to release in the next, for example, in 2 or 3 months, and then you start developing those, test those, and be ready for the release. So in this agile process, what I said, like within 2 months, 3 months, that even broken down to a sprint. In Scrum language specifically, we say that a sprint is generally 1 month or less, and after that sprint cycle, your product or the particular increment should be ready for release. It does not necessarily be released, but it should be complete and should be one feature or goal of your overall product. So that the benefit of this is customer always gets it at least one feature to test, and they can you can get a early feedback in the system. So if anything goes wrong, you are actually working on a small piece of work, and it is easy to go back and revisit your requirement and design and development process. So it is much easier, much faster, not easier, it is definitely much faster. And because the Scrum teams are, or the Agile teams are very small, it is the collaborations works very, very well. Instead of a waterfall model, if you're working on a very complex project, there are so many different components, so many different teams, so many integrations failure can happen, so many testing defects can actually surface when you are after the deployment, right? So this is very, very helpful for a complex product, the Agile methodology. Now let's check out how many different Agile methods are currently around the market. So I will just name the first few, which is very important right now, is this Kanban, Scrum, and Extreme Programming. They are also called a Crystal and DSDM, which is Dynamic System Development Method. So those are all different type of Agile methodology. So Agile concepts are all the same. You are developing a very rapidly changed world. So you take, you break up the full requirement into multiple pieces of requirement and deliver one at a time, but each methodology gives you a specific step how to execute those. Today we will talk about the Scrum. So let's start with the Scrum. The Scrum definition. So Scrum is a very lightweight framework, right? You can just read out the description on my screen, but it helps to solve the very complex problems. So it is very simple. It does not give you any specific direction. It intentionally leaves out some implementation details so that you can accommodate your project needs. Scrum is built upon the collective intelligence of the people using it. So it depends. You can like customize the Scrum framework as per your needs, because Scrum is applicable any specific business or organization. So it is not specific to software industry or like for example car manufacturing process. In any industry, any process, you can use Scrum. So various process and techniques and methods can be employed within the framework. So you can always customize to achieve your goal as you need. So Scrum makes it visible to relative efficacy of the current management environment and the work techniques so that improvement can be made. Successful use of the Scrum dependent on people becoming more proficient in living the 5 values: the commitment, focus, openness, respect, and courage. The decisions that are made, the steps taken, and the way the Scrum is used should reinforce these values, not diminish or undermine them. So sprints, as I said earlier, the sprints are the heartbeat of the Scrum, where ideas are turned into values, and each sprint actually gives you an increment of your product. The Scrum frameworks as outlined herein is immutable. While implementation only parts of the Scrum is possible, the result is not a Scrum. Scrum exists only its entirety. So that means you can customize the Scrum as your own organization needs, but if you do not follow all the process that Scrum prescribed, then entirely it is not the Scrum. You are still following an Agile technique, but you cannot say that you follow the Scrum. So now let's check out the Scrum team, how it consists and how it interacts with each other. So there are 3 major players in the Scrum. So one is called developers, second part is called Scrum Master, and the product owner. So always remember, the developers does not mean that the people who are doing the coding or in any particular process or any industry, they are doing the actual work. The developer also includes the QA or testing team, architect team, business analyst, everybody we just name in a traditional project. Everything in Scrum they consider as a developer. The Scrum Master are not the traditional project managers. Scrum Master are the servant leader, which means that they facilitate different ceremonies in the Scrum process. They help, he or she helps the development team to resolve any impediment, or he or she can escalate the issues to the higher management as well as the development team needs. So his or her job as a Scrum Master is to help the developers to do their daily activities and for the successful sprint. The product owner is one single person for the entire product. A Scrum team can be broken down based on the complexity of the product, or that if the product is too much of work, then it can be divided into multiple Scrum, but all these teams together are under one product owner. And when I say under product owner, Scrum does not define any hierarchy. So nobody below or under any as a traditional project management or the reporting structure. Product owner owns the product, Scrum Master owns the Scrum process, and developers owns the work that they are doing. So during a sprint, the developer themselves are very collaborative, and they deliver the sprint and take the responsibility of the successful sprint. On the other hand, product owner is the person who is responsible for the overall product. He or she is supposed to maximize the value of the product. The Scrum Master or the servant leader, which means the Scrum Master is a leader, but he or she cannot dictate the developers what work needs to be done or what works developer needs to do at what time. What he or she does to ensure the developer knows how the Scrum process works, if the daily Scrums are working right or not, or different ceremonies like sprint review, sprint planning, those are happening there or not. If developers facing any problem, they can just try to help the developers to resolve those